This is MWM on Show 95.
Exactly. And on it, you've got the usual stuff: mules, bushels of wheat, maybe some old plows. And then right there, sandwiched between the livestock and the farm equipment, is a line item for a human being, a 6-year-old boy.
And it is such a stark, dehumanizing image. That boy, of course, was Frederick Douglass. And that ledger, I mean, that's really our starting point for this deep dive.
It has to be. He began his life legally defined as property. Chattel personal, I think is the term. No more rights than a shovel.
But he didn't stay property.
No, he didn't. And that's what we're really digging into today. We're not just doing a standard biography. We are tracking a very specific intellectual journey.
Yeah, we're looking at how a person goes from being a line item in a ledger to becoming, I would argue, the most formidable journalist and constitutional thinker of the 19th century.
That is a huge leap. I mean, from the slave quarters of Maryland to advising Abraham Lincoln in the White House.
It's a massive arc. But if you really look at the sources, his autobiographies, his editorials, there's this single, what he called an unintended lesson that just sparks the whole thing.
You're talking about the mystery of reading.
Exactly. He called it the mystery of reading. And it's this fascinating moment where a violent prohibition against his education didn't just fail to stop him. It actually gave him the blueprint for his own freedom.
So that's our roadmap. We're going to unpack that ironic inspiration from his master, Hugh Auld. We'll look at the guerrilla education he had to piece together on the streets.
And we have to spend some real time on his career as, well, a media mogul. People forget he wasn't just an orator. He ran 3 major newspapers. The North Star, Frederick Douglass's paper.
And the new national era. And we'll get into his break from the white abolitionists and his really radical rereading of the U.S. Constitution.
And finally, how he weaponized language based on his core philosophy.
Uh,
The man struck is the man to cry out.
it's a powerful idea. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so set the scene for us. We usually think of plantation slavery, cotton fields, total isolation. But Douglas ends up somewhere different when he's about 7 or 8.
Right. He gets sent to Baltimore to live with the old family. And this is a really crucial difference. Baltimore was a city, a busy port. It wasn't the isolated rural life he knew. He was sent to be a companion for their little boy, Thomas.
So for him, this must have felt like a huge stroke of luck, a gateway to a different world.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
And the key person here, at first, is Sophia Old, the mistress of the house. The sources say she'd never owned a slave before. She was a weaver, and she treated Douglas, as he put it, as she supposed one human being ought to treat another.
Which must have been a complete shock to his system.
A total shock. I mean, in that sort of natural state, before the conditioning of slavery really set in for her, she starts teaching him. She teaches him his ABCs. She helps him spell little words.
So he's sitting there learning his letters. The world is just starting to open up for him. And then the husband, Hugh Auld, walks in.
And just slams the door shut. I mean, he is furious. He forbids her right there on the spot from teaching Douglas another word.
But it's why he forbids it that matters.
Right.
This is the moment.
This is the moment. He doesn't just say, stop.
Mhm.
He lays out the entire philosophy of oppression for this young boy to hear.
The specific quote from his narrative is just chilling.
It is. He tells his wife that learning would spoil a slave. He says, if you give a nigger an inch, he will take an L. He says it would, quote, forever unfit him to be a slave.
Unfit him to be a slave, so it would make him unmanageable and discontented.
Exactly. Yeah, just pause on that. Old thinks he's warning his wife. He's explaining why slavery needs ignorance to work. But Douglas, even as a little kid, hears something totally different. He calls it a new and special revelation.
That's what's so incredible. Any other kid would be crushed. But for Douglas, it's like a light on. He realizes the white man's power isn't some kind of magic. It's just enforced ignorance.
Precisely. Ald basically told him, the only way I can keep you enslaved is if you remain illiterate. He handed him the key. Douglas later wrote that he owed as much to the bitter opposition of his master as to the kindly aid of his mistress.
It's a huge tactical error. He revealed the entire game.
Yep, so the official lessons stop. But the cat is out of the bag, and Douglas starts what you called his guerrilla education.
It's so clever. He's running errands around Baltimore, and he's always got a Webster's spelling book with him.
Right, and the Alds were doing okay, so Douglas always had bread. But the poor white kids in the neighborhood, the street urchins, they were hungry.
The bread for knowledge exchange.
That's it. He used the one thing he had, food. He'd trade bread with these kids for reading lessons. They'd teach him letters on the pavement.
I mean, the sheer hustle of that. He's literally trading his food for literacy. And then at about age 12, he saves up 50 cents from polishing boots.
You can't overstate the importance of this moment. He buys a book, The Columbian Orator.
And what's so special about that book?
Well, it wasn't just a reader, it was a collection of political speeches. It was basically a textbook on rhetoric. But there was one dialogue in it that changed everything for him.
The one between a master and a slave?
Yes. In the story, the slave gets caught escaping, but he argues his way to freedom. He uses logic and morality to just dismantle every argument the master makes.
And the slave wins.
The slave wins. The master is so impressed he frees him on the spot. Imagine being 12 years old and reading that. It gave him the vocabulary for abolition. He said it gave words to feelings he already had.
So now he has the intellectual tools, but he's still trapped. We should probably talk about the actual escape because it's incredibly tense.
It is. So fast forward to September 3, 1838. He's 20. He knows he has to run.
And he decides to disguise himself as a sailor. Why sailor?
Well, in a port city like Baltimore, black sailors were common. They had a certain freedom of movement. So he puts on the red shirt, the sailor's hat. But it's a thin disguise.
And the big problem is he doesn't have free papers.
No. He borrowed something called a sailor's protection pass from a friend. But the risk is that those passes have a physical description on them. And the one he had didn't match him at all.
So he's on a train, heading north. The conductor is coming down the aisle. His heart must be just pounding.
I can't even imagine. The conductor gets to him, asks for his papers. Douglas has to bluff. He says he doesn't carry his free papers with him, but then he pulls out the sailor's pass.
What does he?
He says, I have a paper with the American eagle on it that will carry me around the world. He's banking on the power of that symbol.
The American eagle.
And it works. The conductor just glances at the eagle, takes his money, and moves on. Doesn't even check the description.
That is terrifyingly close. I mean, one good look at that piece of paper in history is completely different.
Incredibly close. And there was even a man on the train who knew him, who looked him right in the eye and said nothing. Didn't give him away.
Wow. So he makes it to New York, then New Bedford, Massachusetts. He changes his name to Douglas, and he starts reading William Lloyd Garrison's abolitionist paper, The Liberator.
Right. He said it became his meat and drink. It set his soul on fire. And that leads to his public debut in 1841 at an anti-slavery convention in Nantucket.
He's urged to speak.
He was terrified. He said he felt like a slave again. But when he started speaking, the power was just undeniable.
And Garrison, the famous abolitionist, sees this and realizes he's found something special. He hires him. But, and this is where it gets complicated, they didn't really want Douglas the thinker, did they?
No, this is a critical point. They wanted a specimen. Their instructions were basically, tell your story. Give us the facts of your suffering. We'll handle the philosophy.
That is so patronizing. You bring the trauma, we'll bring the analysis.
Exactly. Garrison would sometimes even stop him and say, give us the facts, Frederick. But Douglas was reading everything, law, history. He knew he had to be more than just a narrator.
He refused to be a prop. And that friction leads to a huge break. He decides he needs his own newspaper.
Which was the second Declaration of Independence for him. Garrison was against it. They said a black man couldn't run a paper. But he went to Rochester, New York, away from Boston's influence, and launched the North Star in 1847.
Named after the star that guided fugitives. And the mission statement he writes in that first issue is, well, it's everything.
It's his whole thesis. He wrote, the man who has suffered the wrong is the man to demand redress. The man struck is the man to cry out.
Stop speaking for us. We will speak for ourselves.
And it was broad from the start. The motto was, right is of no sex, truth is of no color. He was a huge supporter of women's rights from day one.
Okay, I want to get into something really deep here. When the North Star becomes Frederick Douglass's paper a few years later, it marks this huge ideological split he has with Garrison over the Constitution.
It does. This is where it gets really fascinating. Garrison's view was that the Constitution was fundamentally a pro-slavery document, a covenant with death, he called it.
Right. So his strategy was burn it, don't vote, dissolve the Union.
Moral purity by disengaging. But Douglas started to see it differently. He started to actually read the text closely. He argued that the words slave or slavery are never actually in the Constitution.
So he's saying the text itself, the language.
The language itself doesn't endorse slavery.
Mm.
He argued that the preamble, secure the blessings of liberty, should govern how you read the whole thing. He came to see it as a glorious liberty document.
That is a massive pivot because if the Constitution is an anti-slavery document, then you can use the government to destroy slavery.
Exactly. Then slavery is unconstitutional. It means you should vote. You should run for office. You should seize the machinery of the state and use it. He went from wanting to burn the system down to wanting to take it over.
And that created a huge rift with his old allies.
Oh, a bitter one. But he held his ground. And while he was writing these editorials, he was also giving these speeches that were just rhetorical masterpieces.
You'd have to be thinking of the 4th of July speech.
What to the slave is the 4th of July.
Yeah.
Delivered July 5th, 1852. It is a masterclass in what we'd call scorching irony.
So walk us through the strategy. How does he set the trap?
Okay, so he's invited to speak. He starts out by praising the founding fathers, calls them great men. He completely disarms the audience, makes them feel patriotic and comfortable.
And then he pulls the rug out from under them.
Completely. He just pivots and says, "This is your 4th of July, not mine." He draws a line in the sand. "You may rejoice, I must mourn."
He basically asks them, why did you bring me here? To mock me.
And then he just dismantles their hypocrisy.
Mm.
He says he doesn't need to argue that slaves are men because their own laws prove it. You pass laws to punish men for crimes, not animals.
Right. If you hang a slave for a crime, you're admitting he's a moral agent.
Exactly. So if he's a man, how can he not be entitled to liberty? To the slave, he says, the 4th of July reveals the gross injustice and cruelty of the nation more than any other day.
But he doesn't end with just condemnation, does he? Tying back to his view of the Constitution.
No, he ends with hope. He says he draws encouragement from the Declaration of Independence. He's scolding America for failing to live up to its own founding principles. He's saying the ideals are right here, you're just not applying them.
It's just an amazing life. From that boy trading bread for letters to the statesman advising presidents.
And we should briefly mention his last paper, The New National Era, which he ran during Reconstruction.
Right, this is after the Civil War. A whole new fight.
A whole new fight. Slavery was gone, but now he was fighting the KKK and the lost cause narrative. He knew the battle for the story was just beginning.
And that paper was a financial failure, wasn't it?
A total disaster. Lost him a fortune. But he said he had no tears to shed over it because the voice was necessary for that moment in time.
Which brings up a sad point about how fragile this history is. We have his books, but a lot was lost.
A lot was lost. In 1872, his house in Rochester burned down, probably arson. The fire destroyed 16 bound volumes of his newspapers. There is no complete collection in existence anywhere.
That's a huge loss. A reminder that these voices can be silenced if we're not careful.
But the impact wasn't lost. And I think that brings us all the way back to that first unintended lesson from Hugh Auld.
The prohibition.
Yeah. I want to leave you with this thought. Hugh Auld said that if you teach a slave to read, he will become unfit for slavery.
And on that one point, he was absolutely right.
He was 100% right. Education did make Douglas unfit for slavery. Auld meant it as a warning, but Douglas heard it as a promise. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other times in history has a wall meant to keep people down inadvertently shown them the exact location of the door?
That is the mystery of reading. Once you turn that light on, you can't turn it off. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.